Hello everyone. Today I will show you how to do an effect like this, where you have a outline around multiple objects that's smoothly blending together as the objects overlap each other. You could do this, you could probably make different stuff like this. I imagine I could do something like Creep from StarCraft or something like this with this if I had a good shader. The short version of how you do this is that you use a viewport to render all your shapes to an image, and then you apply an outline shader to this image. And you also, in this viewport, you create a mirror of the camera and render it to a texture with an outline shader. So let's go into the slightly longer version, and I'll show you. Oops, I lost the game. Whatever. I'll show you how I did this. So here you will see inside my running game, I have this viewport, and within it I have these circles that are rendered, and it has a camera, and there's a sprite here which is a viewport texture which renders the viewport. And if you take a look at the code, if we find the right class file here, let's start here, you will see that I mirror the position of the main camera to the viewport camera, and I also move the sprite for the viewport to the same position as the camera so that everything is rendering correctly. I have not done rotation because I don't have camera rotation in my game, but if you had rotation you have to do this. I also, on setup, I assign the texture of the viewport to the sprite, the sprite being this viewport render sprite that we saw here. You have to do it this way. You cannot do something like viewport texture and like this, and then so viewport path equals get path. This will not work. So don't try this. I tried it. So these three lines here, this will not work. Don't do this. Do it this way. Just assign the texture from the get viewport.get texture and assign it to a sprite. Else it will not work. So let's look at how I set this up. This will just be a brief overview. If you have some detailed questions, you can ask them in the comments and I will try to explain. So first of all, I have this circle. This is a circle that I'm rendering to my viewports. It's a kinematic body 2D, and I'm making it a kinematic body 2D because to get smooth movement, I cannot just assign the... Okay, actually we have to go one step back. The viewport renders the nodes that are children of it to the viewport. This means that anything you want to render to the viewport cannot be a child of something in your main game. So if I want to render a circle around an object that's rendered in my main game, I have to move that separately from whatever is moving in the main game. So if we look at my game here, you will see this little train-like thing, and there are circles around here. So this train is actually part of the main game. If you look in the remote here, we can go into the level, probably in the Y sort, you can see here's the train, here's the wagons, and they are moving within the main game, but the circles are up here in the viewport, so they can't be children of them. And if I just made a sprite here and just set the position, it would look very choppy. So what I actually have to do is that I have implemented an event on these things when they move, and I registered for it, and whenever they move they send an event, and then I mirror the movement exactly on these objects within the viewport. That way they smoothly, if you look here now, they smoothly follow along and there's no choppiness. They're just very smoothly moving. And you have to do that when you deal with viewports if you want to move things smoothly to mirror your main game. It depends a lot about what effect you're going for. Alright, so I have this sprite here. It contains a shader, and this shader is very simple. This is not a shader tutorial, so I'm not going to explain it too much, but what I'm doing here is I'm taking the distance from the center here, and if the distance is less than the size of my circle, which is defined here, I fill it with a color, and if not, I make it transparent. That's it. And the color I can pick here, right? So that's it. That's what this shader does. So I'm rendering a bunch of blue circles. to my viewport. This is my viewport scene, and this is the viewport renderer. I have set up my viewport to be the same size as my project here. And then I mirror the main camera, which is then placed inside the viewport and is mirroring it. I have created an own world here within the viewport, set it to have a transparent background, etc. I disabled 3D because I figured it might be faster. And you also have to flip the vertical because by default viewports are rendered upside down for some reason. So you have to check the flip view. Right, so you set up your viewport like I've set up mine here. You create a world with an environment. I haven't changed anything, it's just the default. Create a camera, write some code that mirrors the camera position to your main camera position if you are moving your camera, or anyway, just to make it easier. Once you've done that, you can add stuff in your viewport, and it will be rendered to this viewport texture. As I showed you, I set the texture to this thing here. This texture is then in my main scene. It is my main scene. It is underneath my camera in the same position as the camera, so it's rendered to the camera. And then on this viewport renderer, I'm applying a second shader, and this is where the magic happens. This shader I essentially just copied from GodotShaders.com. There is an outline shader there. I do not understand completely how it works because I'm not really that good at shaders, which is why I wanted to try to explain it to you. But it creates an outline, and all I did was add this little piece of code here where it checks that either it's creating an outline, and if it's not creating an outline, it just checks if the alpha of the pixel is larger than 0.1. In my case, that means there's something at the pixel, and then it sets the alpha to 0.5. This is simply to make this transparency effect. You see my blue color here is transparent, and by doing it there, I can change the color of my circle, for instance, here to red, run my game again, and now the outline is red, right? So I'm just simply making whatever is here transparent. So if I want to make some fancy graphic texture here, I can do that. So what's the lesson from this? If you want to apply multiple shaders to something in 2D in Godot, you have to use viewports, and you could theoretically chain them. So you can have a viewport that renders to a texture, which is within another viewport, which renders to another texture, which is another viewport, and so on until you eventually render it to your screen. You can use this to do all sorts of effects. You can create minimaps, for instance, with viewport renderers, or you could, yeah, it's really up to your imagination. You can do something like this with an outline shader. There's a lot of stuff you could do with this kind of stuff. Another hint here that I will tell you before we leave is to position this viewport renderer below. If you look in my scenes, some objects are above this circle, like this train thing here is above the circle, while the tile map and stuff is below it. And to do this, I simply set the Z level. Oops. Should be minus 2000 to minus 2000 here, and then I set it not as relative. And then in my main scene, I also adjusted the Z level of my background to minus 4000 here, and my paths, yeah. So that that way you can position it at the layer that you want. And yeah, that's it. This is not a very detailed explanation, but hopefully this will get you going in the right direction if you wish to create a similar effect. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments, and I will try to explain it or make a follow-up video if I feel that's necessary. Alright, and that's it.